I don't know how much you're going to talk about gamification exactly, but I think you have some components together, don't you?
Too little. Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Lydia. Good morning, everybody. Great to be back. I was here 2013, and I'm a little bit embarrassed because I'm on the front page, but there were so little to say from my side, so I invited the audience up on stage. So I had 2 students up on stage, and I can report back that they have been doing fine. They are now PhDs, and they are working for the pulp and paper industry. So that's not bad. Let's see what I will talk about today. I start now. The title for my presentation is Digitization in the Industry Going Forward. I wanted to start a little bit with what we think is most important, all of us sitting in the room. This one is not working now. Now it's working. You all feel healthy, I hope? Yeah, I think in the whole industry, health and safety is becoming number 1, number 2, number 3, and number 4. And I think in the Swedish industry, we really take this extremely seriously. We gain export on it, and we are not happy where we are, but we put a lot of emphasis on it. Also in ABB, we think this is the most important piece. The environmental piece as well, to take part of this and really work hard with it. Integrity as well, that we know what is always right, what is always wrong, and that we create a culture where we can speak up and get support to get it right. And then the customer and quality piece. This is something we start all meetings with in ABB, and we really go into depth to create a culture which is really good for the planet and for ourselves. I hope I share that with everybody in the pulp and paper industry, in the textile industry, and the fashion industry. Are you with me? Good, then we have a good start. Then I can move to the subject. This is not working again. This is working now. ABB takes about 2 hours to present, but I will present it very shortly. We are in the utility business, we are in the industry business, and we are in the transport infrastructure business. I'm 53 years old now. I worked 29 years in ABB, 1.5 years outside ABB in the industry. And I feel that it's embarrassing that I'm 53 because I like to be 25, because it's happening a lot now, not only in the industry, it's happening a lot in the utility business. And you know what's happening in the utility business? You need to manage demand response. A lot of renewables is coming into play. It's becoming a software business. It's becoming an IT business. It's becoming a business where Susanne Timsjö and gamification can play a role as well. So this is not a boring business any longer. This is a fun business as well, and we need a lot of clever people in the utility business. Not people with less hair with little hair like me, 53-year-olds. We need new thinking even there. In the industry, I'm very proud to be here and speaking to the pulp and paper industry because you are forerunners. You're forerunners when it comes to energy saving. You're forerunners in thinking out of the box. You learn us a lot. We learn a lot from the pulp and paper industry in ABB. And I will come back to that later on. We are also working in the transport and infrastructure business as well. We are doing a lot when it comes to home automation. We are doing a lot when it comes to charging of electrical vehicles, like electrical buses, etc. We are working a lot to be participating in developing smart cities. Do you think we are a pretty okay company? Do you think we have a lot to do? Do you think we need you? We need you a lot. So, going forward then, it's not only digitization, it's a lot about automation, it's a lot about robotization. If we do this right, we will be competitive, we will create jobs, we will create welfare, we will be okay with the planet. If we do this wrong, we're going to be like Facit in Åtvidaberg, we will be out of business. So it's also a brutal situation for many companies going forward. It will be a rapid change. It's a lot of buzzwords out there, but we need to land this in reality so it becomes something good. And I think this is very, very important. When we look upon the fourth industrial revolution, which is called in ABB, we define it like Internet of Things, Services and People. Because it's not only Internet of Things that the products become more intelligent. It's also about the creation of new services, new business models, a lot about the services piece as well. And it's a lot about people. Some people know that we launched a collaborative robot last year called Yumi. Have you seen that one? You need to check it out. In the past, the robots were painted orange because they were dangerous and very difficult to program, etc. Now we have launched collaborative robots which can work side by human beings So the people part in Internet of Things, services and people are extremely important. We still need people to do the programming. We still need people to do the supervision. We still need people a lot in all this paradigm shift. Are you with me still? Good. Then, what we are proud of in ABB is that we have a control system which we call 800XA. And when we have developed this control system and continue to develop it together with customers like we have many here in the room, we do it also thinking a little bit about what can we learn from gamification. Susanne Timsjö, who will present later, represents an institute right now, used to work in corporate research, very much with the user experience group looking at the gaming industry. And the speaker after me will talk more about gamification. So already in a company like ABB, a little bit boring on the surface. We are not boring at all, and we work a lot with the gamification industry and the customers. Are you with me on that one? When it comes to the robot business, and I'm not showing me here, we have used the connectivity and the information of intelligent robots for many years. So we have that in place, and we have that for our customers. We also work with cybersecurity in order to protect our customers, but this is happening as we speak, and we have a lot of experience on it. The question is what to do with all this information. What algorithms to do and how to improve your way of working, so you can improve your productivity, reliability, quality, and everything like that. And that is something we work a lot on, and we also look at the gaming industry even here. Another very tangible example is that we are the world leader on automating the crane business, the container cranes, etc. A couple of years back, we came up with the idea together with our customers, also looking at the gaming industry, how can we do this business remotely, not making it much better for the operators, etc. And we are taking great steps, and a lot of customers are now going this way. The center of excellence for this business is in Västerås, and we are proud. This Monday we had a meeting with a big international customer again, so here we are really gaining traction on the remote managing of cranes. Mining industry. Mining industry is down right now, the metal prices are down, but I'm really proud to be here in Sweden together with customers like Boliden and also LKAB, who really think automation for real and who really do things. A lot of international customers are going to Boliden in Aitik, in Gällivare, and in Garpenberg to really look at the way the automation is taken. And we are proud that we are part of that delivery with our 800XA system, fully utilized for a more reliable mining business, for a more productive mining business, a very intelligent mining business where we can connect everything which is in the mine, the concentrator, the smelter, the transport piece, and really building the building blocks for taking this to the next step on Internet of Things, services and people, preparing ourselves to get the benefit out of the Internet of Things, services and people. And what I like with Boliden also is that Boliden invites big companies, small companies, universities. We are all together looking at all the time how to push the limits forward. And I know we do that with a lot of the pulp and paper industry as well. But I think Boliden is a really good example here in Sweden where we get a lot of companies coming together pushing the limits on what we can do and really getting tangible results. Here's a picture from the Boliden mine in Garpenberg. And I would like to emphasize that it's not only big companies doing development here, it's also a lot of small companies. And we see that the underground mining will be very much unmanned. We will use the Internet of Things, services and people in order to know precisely what is doing what. We will use robot technology in a totally different way. And we will use the 5G technology when it comes to wireless. So it will be new steps taken when it comes to the whole mining industry. So we are not yet ready, it will continue to develop. I have a problem with the Internet of Things here. Here we have one example from the pulp and paper industries, and we are proud that we work with all the bigger pulp and paper companies in Sweden, and now I show SCA Östrand. Why do I show SCA Östrand? SCA in Östrand in Timrå makes a huge investment now, taking this to a state-of-the-art mine, pulp mill. And we are really happy that you selected our 800XA system like a building block then to take the next and prepare for the Internet of Things, services and people. And we hope that a lot of other pulp and paper companies will do the same, for sure. A little bit of marketing from my side. Excuse myself for that. At the Hannover Fair in Germany right now, last year we announced the two-armed robot. You need to check it out, Yumi. This year we announced a very smart motor where we have applied our own sensor technology. We have the right algorithms to find out what we need to find out from the motor. You know, you were big users of motors in the pulp and paper industry. With this technology, you can find out the vibrations, the temperature, the load, the energy-saving opportunities. You can really get a lot of information. And this is Internet of Things, services and people connected to the spider in the web, the 800XA system, and get a lot of good things out of it. Sounds easy. Why haven't we done it perfectly before? Well, we have done it on the robots, etc. But it's coming now with the cheap sensor technology and a lot of smartness on algorithms and software so we can provide the right data for the right decisions. And even Barack Obama and Angela Merkel visited our stand and looked at this smart technology, so you can check that out also. I hope that a lot of the Swedish customers will look upon this as well. When we develop solutions, we look at the gaming industry, we look at the young generation. Susanne has been part of it. Alf Isaksson will talk later also, representing what we do on corporate research. But we really try to put the human being in the center. Here we have no human being, but we like the operators to have an attractive, safe, and good workplace so it will become much more efficient. So it's not only about software, it's about ergonomy, it's about how to feel and health and safety and all that aspects, and how to create a stimmung, an atmosphere so people go to work and want to go to school and become experts in utilizing Internet of Things, services and people. That is why I'm afraid that I'm 53, I'm too old now. My sons are 11 and 8 and they're beating me and gaming every day, you know, and I will show you later that game. That's a good game, it's not a brutal game. So, a little bit about employees and people. At the end, I talk technology, but I like to talk people if I get this to work. What do we do in ABB? And a lot of other companies do the same. You represent very good companies. We work with universities. Last time I was here, there were a lot of people represented, students from universities. We have strategic partnerships with 5 of the biggest universities in Sweden, and we commit a lot to take them for summer internships, to take them on for master thesis, and then we do a lot of research together, invite them for PhD studies, etc. And we do more and more and more, and we meet regularly 2 times a year, so we commit to targets and we step that up. At the same time, we have something called ABB's Industry Gymnasium in 3 places, where we also commit a lot. And now we try to go further down, like LKAB, they are good. They start with the 3-year-olds, you know, with camps at the mine. And we try to do something similar with our Internet of Things, services and people. And we're about to launch something that we can reach out together with other companies where we are active in 30 places in Sweden, really to reach out to the younger generation. The trainee program we have had in more than 100 years, and we continue with it, independent of the situation in the world, and we put a lot of emphasis to that. We are also the main sponsor of Mattecentrum, reaching out to 300 students in order to get the mathematics up. If you want to be good in Internet of Things, services and people, mathematics is key, then modeling is key, and software is key. And why shouldn't we be very good in that in Sweden? In Finland, the mathematics level is much higher than in Sweden. I don't know if it's related to the sauna or if it's related to the studying. I think it's a combination. You can check that out, because if you go to sauna also, you increase the stimulation of the brain. That's something which you shouldn't put on the movie, but it's true. You can check that. Then we have the Sustainable Talent Program. We are not happy really that we only have 22% women in ABB. 22% of the managers are women, but we want to reach up to 30 and then ultimately to 50. So we reach out to female students in universities, and we have done this for 5 years. It's really popular, and it's getting traction. So now in the trainee program, we have 50% of the people we take in are women, and we think that's much better. Diversity, we do something called Äntligen Jobb together with a lot of other companies. So we are taking in people now for 6 months internships with us from other countries, and we think that's very important. We have 50 nationalities today in ABB Sweden, and that's why we can compete. We have 83% export. Women Forward is also a program for successful women in the company to get them to role models and to help us to foster a better equality culture. Collaboration is driving the change, and we are part of a lot of collaboration with customers, with institutes where Susanne works right now, with small companies, bigger companies, with universities, also global type of collaboration. So I think collaboration is key, but it's important also that collaboration becomes collaboration. It becomes clear and tangible, so it's not becoming fluffy. I think what we have done together with Boliden and a number of companies and universities, that's really tangible. We need to continue in that path, then we will be very successful from this little country, and we can provide the world with better solutions. And then at the end of it, I think the connection to the next speaker, who is much more brilliant than me in every sense, I think it's important that we engage with the young population coming in. I am a late father, and my 11-year and 8-year, they are really digital, and they are average because they have the DNA from me. But we need to look upon this. This is a great opportunity for businesses, but it's also a great threat if we are not on our toes. We have more than 100-year experience in automation in ABB. We are humble, but we're looking forward to it. In my 29 years in ABB, I've never seen a more interesting time going forward. We are invited by enormous amount of customers who wants to collaborate with us in a tangible way and really reaching out to take next steps. So I'm really happy to be here. I'd like to thank you for the confidence that you work with ABB, and I hope that we don't disappoint you in the future. We are eager to go for new world records in utilities, industry, and transport and infrastructure. Let the kids come to play in our industry. Thank you.
That was a good line. Now, we are going to listen to the next speaker, then you will be back, Johan, for a short discussion. But do I understand you right? There is a sort of war of talent, and of course ABB want to secure the future. Can you sort of imagine to create jobs that are more entertaining for coming employees, that have the same triggers as the computer games? Do I understand you correctly?
You are dead right. We used to be ranked #1 in the universities. Google has beaten us badly, but we're going to be back. Sorry, I like Google. But it's more fun in the industry. Pulp and paper industry, ABB, is more fun.
Yes.
It's for real.
But, however,
we need to bring them.
But, however, Johan, is it okay that people from the younger generation want to have more entertaining jobs than you had when you started?
My job was very entertaining, I can tell you. That's another seminar. I needed to go to Venezuela, despite I didn't speak Spanish, in 3 months. That was pretty entertaining.
That was pretty entertaining. Yeah. Okay. Why don't you listen to the next speaker, and then I'll invite you again. Thank you for now, Johan. Thank you. I'm so thrilled to present the next speaker to you. It's Sebastian Deterding. Deterding. My name is Capolicchio. You can call me whatever you want. Sebastian, you are an interface designer.
Yep, among many, many other things. I'm poaching here and there.
And you have a lot of interesting things to tell us today. I just want to ask you, you know, a couple of years ago, media and the society discussed that, gamification, young people sitting in front of a screen all day, that's not healthy, da-da-da. Have we passed that? Are we over that discussion now?
Well, the science fiction writer William Gibson once famously said, the future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed yet. So depending on where you look, definitely people are now coming to realize video games are now in art galleries. Video games are now used to cure people of post-traumatic stress disorder. Video games are now used in order to train students to learn things like programming. So there are lots of uses that we have for video games that have nothing to do with just mere entertainment, or where people are concerned about whether they make people violent or not. And by the way, that kind of fear is that fear pops up whenever a new medium pops up. Right? When radio popped up, everybody then thinks of the War of the Worlds with H.G. Wells, how people confuse radio and reality and run out of their houses. When movies came along, the famous early story of movies is when they showed one of the first films where a train was coming in at the audience, that the audience was so surprised by that, believing it was a real train, that they ran out of that studio, which goes back to Pygmalion, right, who fell in love with a statue. So whenever a new medium comes along, we're all afraid that we're now confuse reality with the medium, but that's just something that happens with every medium. And with games, as with any other medium, we discover we can use it for all kinds of purposes.
Okay, I agree. The stage is yours, Sebastian.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining me, for showing up for such a weird and cryptic word that you've heard all a couple of times already. And, well, I agree with the previous speaker that definitely there is something about digital games that appeals to young audience. I would like to sort of question and break that myth and say, actually, games is something that we all spontaneously, naturally do all the time. So we all turn our everyday life already into games. So this is nothing new. This is nothing that is just for young people. And to give you an example for that, I'll just like to take you back into my own childhood. Now, this is not me, but this is how my walk back home from school looked like. Lots of concrete, very dreary. It was about a 20-minute long walk, and it got completely boring because I was somewhere in the countryside where there was nothing to do. So in order to make that walk a little less boring and tedious for me, I looked down at the floor, at the cracks in the pavement, and I said, what if I imagine that those cracks in the pavement are not just cracks in the pavement, but I'm actually standing on an active volcano. And out of these cracks comes hot lava. And so now what I have to try to do is to flee from the volcano that is erupting behind me without stepping on any of the cracks, because if I do that, then I die. Right? And other people do that if you have a white and black checkered floor, right? You try to step only on the white ones and not on the black ones. And that way you make that kind of activity a little less boring, a little less tedious, right? Show of hands, who in their childhood has ever done anything like that, turned a little everyday activity? Right? Basically, the overwhelming majority here. A second example. Again, this is not me, but my parents had a humongous lawn in the backyard, and because I was a single child for a long time, I always had to mow the darn thing, which I necessarily like. And again, it was very boring, very tedious, very laborious, so I thought, well, how can I make this a little less tedious? Well, one great thing about mowing the lawn is you can really see your progress, right? You can really see what you mown and what you haven't mown. So what I did, in my head, I chunked up that little lawn into different quarters, and I said, okay, now I'm going to do 10%, 20%, 30%, and then that quarter I'm going to do diagonally, and that quarter I'm going to do vertically, and that one I'm going to do horizontally. That way, splitting up a very big, daunting task into something that is a little less big and daunting, and making that way less tedious. Third example, in that very same lawn, in that very same backyard, we had a little sandbox where I was playing with my friends. And the great thing about that sandbox is it was shielded with trees from the house. So where my parents and their friends were having coffee and they would think that we would do fun things like building sandcastles in the sandbox, we were actually doing nasty things with Legos and Playmobiles. And that was the great thing about this sandbox, that this was an uncontrolled room where we were free to our own mischief, where we could play around and do the kinds of things that we wanted to do. So if you zoom out here, you can already see that in these everyday activities, and I'm sure a lot of you, are using a lot of the elements spontaneously, intuitively, that make games fun and compelling. Things like wrapping stuff in a little story, or giving yourself rules so you create a challenge, or setting yourself goals and creating a bit of variety and getting feedback on how well you're doing on your goals, or having a safe free space where basically you are in control of yourself. So the interesting question for this industry and for a lot of other industry comes, can we apply that kind of thinking to work, to make it more appealing to new entrants, or even to motivate employees and customers more to do whatever we want them to do? And this thing now, since about 2011, has a word. It's called gamification. It's basically the same idea that we can use elements from games, elements from game design, and apply them in other contexts in order to make those other contexts more appealing and engaging. Has taken the technology industry by storm, showed up around 2010, 2011, back then on the early Gartner hype curve, right there at the peak of inflated expectations. I would argue we're beyond that right now. And right now you see implementations everywhere. You see it in business software like Salesforce, customer management software, where people earn points and badges for how many customers they won. You see it in health and fitness with health trackers, where people, again, measure and track their own progress and set themselves goals. You can see it in education, as I mentioned, as here with Khan Academy, where, again, students learn different things and they can unlock badges and set themselves goals in order to learn all kinds of basic things. Right? And I would argue that this is very, very relevant to all kinds of industries, because in the new, highly automated, highly digitized work environment, most of the jobs that we will have to do are knowledge and creative work, right? They're not physical labor, it's knowledge and creative work. And Towers Perrin did a global workforce study in 2011 looking at these kind of jobs and just asking people at workplaces all across different companies, how engaged are you? How engaged do you feel in your workplace? They found that about 20% of companies' employees overwhelmingly said they're engaged. 40, so in the middle, and 40 actively disengaged. And then when they took that and they squared that with the business results, they found the companies that had engaged employees had 19% year-over-year increase in operating income. Those that had disengaged employees had minus 32%. The same thing with earnings per share or income growth. So whether your employees are engaged in the workplace or not makes a big difference for your bottom line. So we need to engage future employees as well as existing employees in order to move the needle. And games or game design might be a solution to that. And for the remainder of the talk, I think in order to bring this solution to reality, what we have to do is to overcome three very common misconceptions, right? Like the idea of games that's just for kids, three misconceptions that a lot of people have about games, about work, and about motivation in general. And I'm going to talk about them and then give you a practical example how to put that into practice. So the first misconception is that work is the opposite of play, right? We say, okay, work, that's what I do in the job, and I have a very grim face, and I do it for money, and then when I'm playing, I'm fun, and I'm enjoying these kind of things, and nobody needs to pay me for that, right? So basically, we have this idea that there are some activities that are really inherently fun and enjoyable, and then there are some things that are not, right? Like school or like work, right? Those are not fun by definition. But actually, that's completely wrong. The great Hungarian and American psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, back in the 80s and 90s, did large-scale studies studying when people have optimal experiences, which he called flow experiences. So when is it that you feel really you have a peak experience, this is the best you ever felt in your life, this is, I'm completely absorbed in this activity, I'm really enjoying this. So he looked across all activities, people reported that, and then he tried to distill when are these kind of experiences happening and what are the shared features of these kinds of optimal experiences. And here are the shared features that he found. You have to have a sense that your skills are adequate to cope with the challenges at hand, right? If you're not as skilled as the activity that's required, you feel stressed, you feel frustrated. If it's easier than what you can do, you feel bored. So sense that your skills are adequate to the challenges at hand. You have clear goals and rules that give you clear feedback on how well you're doing relative to your activity. So you get a constant feedback loop from the activity telling you how well you are doing. And you have very clear goals, right? You don't have any conflicting ones. As a result of that, your concentration, your focus on the activity is so intense that you lose a sense of self and a sense of time, right? You get lost in the activity, very literally so. And because you're so lost, you don't think about any negative things in your life. You don't think about the shitty commute you had in the morning or things like that. And these kinds of things where we have this intense loop between the activity and ourselves so that we lose ourselves in it are so gratifying that people report, I like to do this for its own sake. Okay? And if you think, well, that sounds a lot like the kind of features that you already described initially around games, yeah, that is quite the case. But I would argue this is not just the case in games. So just a question. Have you in the audience ever had any moments where you were so engaged in your work you forgot time in yourself? Raise your hands if that has ever happened. That's the overwhelming majority of people here in the room. Have you ever had moments in your work where you enjoyed work, where you said, this was actually enjoyable doing? Again, it's the overwhelming majority of people. And Csikszentmihalyi and colleagues actually studied, as I said, when do people experience flow in lifetime? And oddly enough, chances are, in work, 54% of the time that they pinged people with a little beeper saying, how do you feel right now? 54% of the time at work, people said, I'm really engaged, I'm really in flow. Whereas in most leisure time activity, only 17% of the time people said, I'm right now in this optimal state, right? So very often we actually enjoy and we engage in work, and vice versa. It's not necessarily the case that every time we play a game, just because we play a game, it's enjoyable. Here are a couple of quotes from actually my PhD research back in the day. I need to be very routinized. I mustn't let myself drift. I hammer it through. Often you have to force yourself to do it. You're under real pressure. It's extremely exhausting. It wears you out. My friends usually cannot comprehend how stressful this is. Now, these are people talking about their experience playing video games, right? So in the very same way that it is not true that work is the opposite of play, it's not necessarily true that play is the opposite of work, right? Rather, it is when we enjoy an activity for its own sake, when we get lost in the activity, then that activity becomes play, and when we feel forced, pressured, when we feel we're not engaged in the activity, then it feels like work, no matter whether the activity is playing a game or whether the activity is working by its label. So that's the first misconception, which leads us to the question, well, what is it that makes activities engaging or not? What is it that drives us? What is it that gives activity this state, this experience, this sense of flow? Which leads me to the second misconception, that is, people need pushing, right? The reason why we do things, the things that drive and engage us, are basically pushes. And this is a very kind of classic, almost neoclassical economic argument. It's dominant in management literature. It's been dominant in the psychological literature for the first half of the 20th century. It's what in management theory is sometimes here referred to as theory X, or in psychological literature, extrinsic motivation. People are inherently inactive, lazy, they just sit on their ass, and you basically have to get them up by either giving them monetary incentives or by threatening punishment, right? People avoid effort, people avoid punishment, and people seek out money. So you have to push them from the outside. But there is a counter theory, which in management theory is called theory Y, in psychology called intrinsic motivation, that people actually are inherently active. Right? We want to grow, we want to get better, we want to be engaged in our world. So you don't have to push us, you just have to give us an environment where exactly this inherent activity gets fed and gets supported, where we feel we are intrinsically motivated in the activity. Now, the interesting thing about a lot of the current gamification literature and talk is that they're actually talking theory X. They are actually talking about people are lazy, they sit there, but the great thing that these game systems is with points and badges is they give people rewards, right? They basically reward players for activity, and that's why games are enjoyable. Basically, they make the argument that games are like these little Skinner boxes where you're a rat, and every time you hit the right button, you get a little food pellet, right? And that's what games makes great and engaging and addictive. The only issue is, if that were the case, then this should be the funnest game ever, earning you a whopping trillion points every time you hit the button. Right? And then you look at this, I don't know if that's right. Luckily, there's an actual experiment by Jakob Sterning, who created progress wars in order to test this theory. So it's this little application where you can just press a button to perform a mission, like aggravating the Yakuza, or whatever these game designers come up with, and then you see how you make progress, and you earn points, and then you level up, yay, again, and again, and again, and you level up again, and then you hide from soybeans, and so on. And you realize, yeah, that's sort of fun in a satirical way, but that's not really what makes games fun and engaging. So what is? What is it about games? What is it that instills this sense of flow? And for that, I would like to come to my favorite theorist of fun, which is Rev Koester, famous game designer, wrote a whole book about fun for game design. And his answer in one sentence is, fun is just another word for learning. Which you may say, well, that sounds pretty counterintuitive, because learning is school, and school is not fun. So what does he mean with that? Well, he says, basically, the fun from games comes out of the experience of mastery and accomplishment. It is that games are basically these machines that put challenges in front of us, like, oh, I have to learn Spanish in 3 months, and it continually produces these kinds of challenges, like I have to take a curve in a racing game, or I have to beat a monster, or I have to figure out a puzzle in Sudoku. And every time I manage to overcome this, I have this sense of, yay, I'm good at this, I'm great, right? I'm making progress, I figured this thing out, I'm totally ruling this. So, in another word, the fun in games lies between this tension where you're sitting in front of the machine and you have your tongue clenched in your mouth and you don't really know whether you're going to make it or not, and then the happy resolution when you actually managed it, when you actually made it. And the truth is, that is the very same core motivation that drives a lot of our flow experiences at work and that drives motivation at work. Teresa Amabile, at Harvard, done one of the largest study about inner work life, just what makes people engaged and disengaged at the work. And the one thing she distilled, great book, you should absolutely read it, but the one thing they distilled was the progress principle of all the positive events that you have in your work life that determines whether you're engaged or disengaged in work. Having the sense that you accomplish something, that you make progress in something that you care about, is the most important, is the most meaningful one. And it turns out that these are not just, here's a work psychologist doing this, and here's a game designer doing this. This is actually very, very basic psychology about what motivates people. Edward Dacey and Richard Ryan are right now the two foremost psychologists in the area of intrinsic motivations. Why is it that we do certain things for their own sake, that we inherently enjoy certain activities? And basically, they say, in the same way that we have inherent physiological needs, like hunger or thirst or sleep, we have inherent psychological needs. In order to flourish, in order to grow, in order to be nourished, we need to feel competent. That is essentially what Koester is talking about with mastery, or Amabile with progress. We need to feel autonomous and related. And when an activity gives us this sense of competence, autonomy, and relatedness, we enjoy the activity. We're willing to do it for its own sake because it gives us this experience, and we're very likely feeling an immense sense of flow. And again, to connect that to your work life, ask yourself again about all the moments when you felt that you actually enjoyed work. Were there some of these moments where you felt that you accomplished something, that you mastered something that requires skill, that you achieved some important change in the world? Of the moments that you experienced kind of enjoyment in your work, one of those moments was something like that. Yeah, very good share. That is the experience of competence. When you enjoyed work, were there any moments where you felt you were in tune with yourself? You weren't forced to do it. You didn't feel like you had to force yourself. You feel you were actively choosing and embracing this kind of activity that you did. Yeah, again, like 50, 60%. That is autonomy. That is what meant with autonomy. And then, when you enjoyed work, did you feel connected with others? Did you feel that some of the enjoying moments in work life came out of the fact that you felt connected to your colleagues or to your customers or to your peers? Again, a very good proportion, right? So, again, right, we have this misconception that people need pushing and that work is the opposite of play, but actually, in work and play, we as humans are active, and we actively seek out and enjoy those very same kinds of experience of being autonomous, of being competent, and being related. Which leads us to the next question. Well, oh, fine and well, now we know the same motives drive work and play. Well, how do we make that more likely? Because still, right, if you're in an operating room, very often that's boring, that's not enjoyable, that's not engaging in a lot of moments, whereas gameplay, more often than not, it is. So what is it that game designers do to make that kind of experience more likely? And that brings me to the third misconception, which is fun is an additive. And that's the prevailing conception right now in gamification, that fun is just a crunchy flake you can sprinkle onto something and then, ta-da, it is more fun, right? And that, again, goes back to the same misconception that some things are inherently fun And some things aren't. So to make the things that are not fun more engaging, you just add fun stuff to non-fun stuff, for more fun. That is, you add pinball machines and swings to an office, and ta-da, the office work will become more enjoyable and engaging. Right? It's what in the Mary Poppins song was called a spoonful of sugar, helps the medicine go down. Right? And in gamification, it's the same. Just a spoonful of badges and points added, little bit of virtual rewards will make work that much more fun. And actually, that's a very old misconception. We already had that if you think back about the 1980s, 1990s, when CD-ROMs came about. We had this hot new thing, which was called edutainment. Right? Now we're going to make education entertaining. So what we're going to do is we'll take standard educational stuff, like multiple choice questions about financial literacy, and then we're just going to shove them into a game, and ta-da, people will enjoy it. So you play the soccer game as a regular soccer game, and every time you try to score a goal, up pops a multiple choice questionnaire, checking account overdraft protection, question, covers transactions when your account has insufficient funds, can be tied to your savings account, generally has a fee for the service, or all of the above. Right? Sounds like both the game and that kind of activity now have become much more enjoyable. In fact, they haven't. If you look into the research, this thing was a resounding failure. And it was a resounding failure because it subscribed to the same misconception that, to speak again of another technology industry, that we've observed with Web 2.0, right? This idea that with new web technologies, we could harness collective intelligence from our users. With sites like Flickr or YouTube, we can motivate our users to produce content for us. But then what most Web 2.0 platforms inside did, instead of asking, well, what's the deep structure of these things that make them so that people want to engage in that, basically you got rounded corners and you got wikis, right, corporate wikis, and nobody ever used the corporate wiki. Right? So the very fact that you just have the technology or the design feature and you just add it doesn't mean that the activity becomes more engaging or gets more activity out of your users. So what is? And I would argue, again, the answer is already a pretty old one. It again comes from Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who said mowing the lawn and waiting at the dentist's office can be enjoyable provided one restructures the activity by providing goals, rules, and the other elements of enjoyment. And I think the important word here is restructuring. It's not about just adding something that we believe is fun, right? Giving you a lolly every time you did a good job. It's about how can I reorganize the work activity in such a way that it is more flow-inducing, in such a way that people are more likely to have experience of relatedness, of autonomy, and competence. So how do we do that? A couple of practical examples, and then I'm closing. First one, how do we design for competence experience, right? The sense of making progress, of achieving something. And I think the one thing we have to add to Coster here is fun is just another word for learning through well-formed challenges. That is what game design excels at. It organizes learning, it organizes work or activity in a good form that is optimally challenging. Now, how do they do that? Well, first thing, if you take a game like golf, very simple, right? They give you goals. In golf, the goal is to get the ball into the hole. If that would be everything, golf would be a supremely boring sport. Because you could just take the ball, walk to the hole, drop it in, and, right? Perfect score every time. So, games add rules, and very clear rules, not conflicting rules, like very often in lots of corporate contexts, not conflicting goals, like very often in many corporate contexts, but it's a very clear goal, very clear rules that say, well, you can't just do anything, right? You have to use this weird stick, and you have to start from this weird space, and wherever the ball lands, from there you have to play it. And that combination of clear, non-conflicting goals and rules creates interesting challenges, challenges that are neither frustratingly hard nor boringly easy, like, will I make it over there? And then, if you add constant, clear, informative feedback on how well you're doing relative to your goal, you get experiences of competence, right? You get the fist bump saying, yes, I made it, 3 under par, woohoo, I'm good. Whereas if you just give people feedback or you just give people incentives, you basically give them feedback without the challenge. You don't structure the whole activity, you just give them a little reward for it. So there's your first misconception. Now, in work activities, if I'm talking about designing challenges, there is obviously a big danger. The danger is that we make work more tedious and challenging than it already is, right? That is, we can stand in people's way. Now imagine you would apply that logic to something like a bus ticket vending machine, right? Which is already pretty puzzling, let's say, if you're somewhere in Asia and trying to figure out how to get your bus ticket. And then you ask a gamifier, say, hey, turn this into a fun challenge, you know, with goals and rules and stuff. And then the game designer says, sure, let's make it a labyrinth. Right? In order to get your ticket, you have to move the little red ball to the ticket. And then you say, well, and of course, because you know you get better over time, so I have to increase the challenge after a time. Next time you come to the machine, I give you level 2. Right? So that's not the case if you think about applying this to work. If you think about applying this kind of thing to work, you have to ask, what's the challenge that's already inherent in monitoring quality or going out into the world in my factory or taking samples? What is the thing that people can already learn and have to learn to get better at? And how can I use the Internet of Things? How can I use sensors in order to create clear goals and feedback and rules around that very activity to optimize learning and getting better for my employees? You have to find the inherent challenge in the activity. And just to give you a very practical example here, we did this for car assembly training with an automotive company, where they said, we have this new factory plant somewhere in South America. We can't use any kind of technology there. We don't have enough trainers. So can you come up with a way of doing this kind of thing of teaching people car assembly? Well, one of the things you have to learn in car assembly, the thing you have to learn to get better up, is basically memorizing the sequence of steps in which to do stuff. There are lots of games that are about memorizing sequences. So we just said, that's great. You already have this instruction manual, which is basically this ridiculously long Lego manual for how to put together a car. And individual workers just have to memorize short pieces of that. So we just take all the pages out of that instruction manuals, shuffle them, and then people together in a team play with that. They reveal one part, then they reveal the next one. We erase all the page numbers, and they have to figure out in which order they come. And then I suggest an order, the next one draws the next page, places it there, has to figure out where that fits, and then can either say, I don't believe this order is right, I think we got it wrong, and then you turn it around and figure out which was right, or just add to it. So the inherent challenge is memorizing sequences, and we just turned the instruction manual into a card game around exactly that, and it worked brilliantly well, particularly with people talking about it. The second element when it comes to designing for an experience of competence and mastery is to give people juicy feedback. Now, what do I mean with that? Well, has any of you played the game Peggle? Well, 1, 2. Okay, for the others, I'm sorry if I now ruined a bit of your work time, productivity. But actually, I'm very happy to. So Peggle is a bit like pachinko. That is, you have this little ball here in the top, and you have to shoot down all the orange balls here in the field. There were a lot more of these balls here, so you have to target this ball and then shoot all the orange balls. And I already cleared the level with everything but this last little one. So let's see what happens if I clear the last one. Right? When's the last time you got that kind of feedback when you cleared your inbox? Not that you ever managed to clear your inbox. I also never do. But right, it's when I'm actually making progress, that thing should be acknowledged, recognized, and celebrated. Okay. Second of the two, and then I'm closing. Autonomy, right? Supporting the sense of I am in control of myself. I'm not forced to do these kind of things. Now, one danger with gamification is that we actually undermine people's sense of autonomy. Practical example for that, Disneyland used gamification back in the day in their Disneyland hotels. Where what they basically did, they put up big flat screens in the laundry rooms where people are folding laundry, and they were measuring how fast people are folding laundry, and they were showing basically a leaderboard where they say, well, that employee is faster than the other employees, right? In a sense that this would spur a fun sense of competition between the employees. But then when they actually interviewed the employees and said, how do you feel about this? They said, well, this is not fun at all. This feels like an electronic whip. This feels like management finding yet another way to breathe down my neck and tell me in very concrete detail what to do. So this is anything but enjoyable. Basically, what this kind of system does is it undermines one of the fundamental enjoyments that there are in activity, one of the things, the experiences that we crave for, which is to be in control, to not be coerced and controlled by others. Right? Which is one of the big enjoyments that games and play actually give us, because these are the kinds of situations where We do stuff voluntarily, right? It's not necessarily that games are so fun that people play them voluntarily. It's because this is an activity where I get to call my own shots, I enjoy that activity more than other activities where I don't get to call the shots. So how can we support that in a work environment where arguably, right, there are some hard consequences and there are certain points where you have to tell people what to do? Well, the first thing, particularly if you talk about complex problem solving and creativity, you have to give people, your employees, safety spaces where it's okay to explore and experiment, right? Where you don't feel pressured and coerced by, oh my God, what is going to happen if I fail? That's when you see young children and animals play. When the parents are around and say, nothing can happen to you, you can freely explore, I'm going to make sure, right, that this is safe from consequence for you. One of the movements that tries to do that kind of thing right now in the workplace are organizations like Fail Forward that try to establish cultures and practices in organizations in order to say, hey, you shouldn't punish failure, you should create a more enlightened way of dealing with failure as a way of making and sharing experiences so that people are not afraid to explore stuff, to innovate, because if you do that, ultimately there will be 5 things that fail before you hit the one thing that really succeeds, right? But if you don't invite that kind of exploration in the same way that play does, you're not going to get any learnings out of that, and you're not going to get people to innovate. Another way to support autonomy is to give workers meaningful choice in what they do, right? It might still be that you have an overall cooperation goal, but how your particular employees go about it, that you can give them a lot of autonomy about. One of the most brilliant examples of that is Zappos and Zappos customer service department, right? Zappos is famous, so it's a shoe and clothes delivery in the US, online service. It's famous for having one of the best customer experiences in the world. And how do they do that? Well, they take in their customer service agents, which is usually one of the most, controlled, tedious, micromanaged environments possible, because you just have these ring books or computers that tell you by the letter what to tell the people that you have on the phone, which makes it a crappy experience for us on the phone as well. And Zappos does the exact opposite by giving their workers maximum autonomy. They say, only rule, make the customer happy. You're there, you're in charge, we give you the tools, make the customer happy. Result? Highest retention, highest workplace engagement, highest workplace satisfaction in the whole customer service industry, in those kinds of departments. Okay, final one, relatedness, feeling connected to each other. And again, a very practical example. This one here is from my colleague Jörg Niesenhaus in Germany, who was tasked to gamify operator stations in an assembly line in a factory producing lamps. And because everything is ND8, we can only show these kind of Lego models of things and not the actual photos of the factory, but this is what he did. Now, assembly line work seems to be the most repetitive, stressful, prescribed, inautonomous, boring, non-challenging activity ever, right? So what did they do to figure that out? The answer is they focused on relatedness. They focused on the team. The first thing that they did is they tracked all the activities, right, using things like sensors, etc., in the environment. They tracked all the activities, but they didn't track the individual activities and compared individual against each other, or then attached incentives or punishments to that kind of thing. They created a collective score for each shift team, and instead of having management then probe the team about that, they just gave that as a feedback loop to the team. They said, you team, see over time how well you're doing day over day over day over day. And that is a way for you to figure out what didn't go well today, that the score is lower than yesterday, in order to basically support a kind of continuous learning and improvement process within the team. They created joint accomplishments for the team. One of the big things about assembly line manufacturing is people have to take pauses, people have to take breaks. If you take them at the wrong time, it can really hold up everybody else. So timing pauses is important. So what they did in the system, if a worker pushes a button and says, I want to take a break now, the system calculates and said, actually, the optimum time for you to take a break is 3 minutes down the line or 5 minutes down the line. Are you willing to take a break then? You can still take the break now, but that would be optimal in terms of production flow. And if you do so, you and all your workers earn X minutes of extra free time to take. Again, it's a collective, a joint accomplishment, and it's a feedback loop that makes people think about the total process in a positive manner. And finally, one of the oldest tricks in the books for flow, particularly with teams and groups, is rhythm, right? If we dance together, if we if we do sportive rhythmic activity together, that is tremendously flow-inducing. So they did the same thing with operators that work together and assemble a lamp together. They basically created, again, sensors that measured how one of the workers was actually in what stage they were, translated that into sounds, and translated that into a light ample that would give the other workers signals about where the other one was. And that way the two workers could sync up with each other and basically get into an uninterrupted, almost dance-like flow of doing things together. So, to summarize, I tried to make the argument that both to get new employees and to motivate to engage our old employees, we have to think about how to design things in order to make them more motivating and engaging. And that games might be a way, game design might be an insight in order to do that. But in order to overcome that, we have to basically, in order to do that right, we have to overcome 3 misconceptions. The first one is that work is the opposite of play. And I hope to have shown you that good work actually is play. Good work is something we enjoy doing it for its own sake, and it occurs pretty often in the workplace. The second misconception is that people need pushing, right? We need rewards and punishments. Whereas actually in work and play, we as people actively seek out and enjoy experiences of autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And then finally, how do we make activity such that they deliver more of that kind of experience? The misconception there is that fun is an additive, something that you can just sprinkle on like sugar or spray on like clotted cream. And actually, it's not about adding things. The thing that we can learn from game design is how to restructure and reorganize activities such that they become more motivating. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian. Johan, could you please join the stage? I think we have time for one question because this is quite interesting. And the question is, of course, are there any areas within ABB where you feel that this can be used to sort of motivate people? Because the key word here is avoid boredom, do less tedious jobs, as Sebastian said. Could you use this somewhere in ABB?
For sure. We are already using a lot of this, but we can use it much, much more. I think you underline the importance of everybody wants to play in a winning team. Everybody wants to have an individual development, and I think technology is there to give this UC feedback. I take that sticky word, the UC feedback. How can we use that in the daily operations? Because we try to do it for the customers, but how can we do it for ourselves in a much better way? So I think a lot of brilliant things. I took a lot of notes in the formalistic way on a piece of paper. I will turn it digital and make it more fun when I come home.
And do you remember, Johan, always when you are at SPCI, there are things happening and then you start programs and projects after that. So
exactly.
This is maybe something that will happen too. Unfortunately, we have a lack of time, so I would just like to tell to the audience that Sebastian is here until around 1. You can continue to discuss with him if you want to. Johan is here also, or?
I want to say something. I must say that you representing the pulp and paper industry in Sweden, you're extremely good. You should feel that. You're really on a high level when it comes to technology. And I want to say that all of your companies here represented. And you're eager to take next steps. So you should feel that motivation when you go home.
And
Thank
also,
you.
Thank you.